You don't have to hurt him, teach him, or prove anything to him. All you have to do is let go, fully, quietly, confidently, because the moment you stop carrying his name in your heart, he starts carrying yours in his regret. This isn't about revenge, it's about reclaiming your power, and nothing echoes louder in a man's mind than the woman who healed, leveled up, and moved on without looking back. The moment you stop chasing someone who never showed up for you in the way you deserved, everything in the dynamic shifts. It's almost ironic. When you were available, consistent, and invested, he barely noticed the value of what he had. But the second you pull back, not out of strategy, but out of self-respect, something powerful begins to unfold. He starts feeling the absence of what he once took for granted. People often believe that the only way to be remembered is to stay, to talk, to fight, to prove. But the truth is, nothing leaves a deeper mark than the silence of someone who once cared loudly. You were a source of validation, attention, comfort, and emotional safety, even in moments he didn't earn it. When that disappears, he suddenly feels the gap your presence used to fill. It isn't that you're trying to make him regret anything. It's that detaching your energy reveals what he failed to appreciate. When you stop chasing, he's left alone with a reality he can't avoid anymore. He had someone who cared, and now he doesn't. Men often mistake your consistency for permanence. They assume you'll always be there because you always were. But the day you walk away, not dramatically, not bitterly, just quietly, he feels a shift he can't explain. It's not anger, it's not punishment, it's the truth finally catching up to him. Your absence forces him to see what your presence masked. He starts remembering all the times you tried, all the effort you gave, all the patience you extended. These memories hit harder when they're no longer accessible. The late-night conversations, the emotional support, the softness you offered even when you were hurting, these are things he replayed lightly when you were around. But now, those same moments echo louder because there's no new version of them coming. The well has dried up, and he didn't notice how much he relied on it until it was gone. This is the part most people underestimate. Your energy is powerful. When it's gone, the void it leaves is unmistakable. You see, chasing someone drains you, but being chased by the memory of someone you didn't value is its own kind of torture. He'll start noticing things he didn't before, your kindness, your loyalty, your depth. He'll compare every new interaction to the way you made him feel. And that comparison is rarely flattering for the people who come after you. He may not admit it. Most men won't. Regret rarely announces itself. It shows up in the quiet moments, when he scrolls through old messages, when he sees something that reminds him of you, when he hears your favorite song, or when he meets someone new and realizes the connection doesn't feel the same. It shows up in the hesitation before texting you again, in the urge to check your social media, in the confusion of wanting access to a person he once kept distant. His mind starts chasing what his ego once dismissed. But the beauty is, by the time he feels this shift, you're already moving forward. You're regaining your confidence, your clarity, your sense of self. You're remembering what life feels like when you're not shrinking to be chosen. And that's the real transformation. When you stop chasing him, you start attracting better for yourself. And that's when he truly feels the loss, not because you punished him, but because you finally chose yourself. And nothing echoes louder in his regret than the woman who stopped making him the center of her world and became the center of her own. What hurts most after someone leaves isn't the person themselves. It's the story you created about who they could become. We often fall in love twice, once with who they are, and once with who we imagine they might be if they finally healed, matured, or stepped up. And that second love, the one built on potential, is always the harder one to let go of. Detaching from him isn't just about removing his presence from your life. It's about untangling yourself from the fantasy your heart stitched together piece by piece. It's realizing that the version of him you held onto so tightly existed mostly in your mind, not in his behavior. And that realization, while painful, is also incredibly freeing. When you start letting go of the story instead of the person, you begin to see things clearly. You stop romanticizing the moments where he gave you breadcrumbs and calling them effort. You stop rewriting the past to justify staying. You stop telling yourself that one day he'll wake up and suddenly become the partner you deserved from the beginning. You finally see that the relationship wasn't lost potential. It was a series of warnings you were too hopeful to take seriously. And the moment you accept that truth, the emotional chains begin to break. This shift hits him in a way you might not expect. Because while you were holding onto the story, you were still present. You were still emotionally available. You were still giving him access to your heart, your time, your vulnerability. Even if things weren't perfect, he knew you were there. But when you let go of the fantasy, something inside you changes. You stop showing up with the same softness. You stop excusing behavior you once tried to understand. You stop giving him the benefit of the doubt. You start viewing him for who he is right now, not the version you hoped he could grow into. And that's when he feels the shift. Men can sense when a woman's energy detaches, even if she hasn't said a word. Something subtle but powerful happens. You no longer look at him with the same expectation. You no longer ask for the bare minimum. You no longer wait for him to meet you where you've been standing for too long. Your patience quiets, your effort softens, your hope dissolves. And he may not be able to articulate it, but he feels that the emotional door he once walked in and out of freely has become heavier to push open. Detaching from the story isn't coldness, it's clarity. You begin reclaiming the parts of yourself you lost while trying to make that fantasy come true. You remember what it feels like to have boundaries. You remember how to listen to your intuition instead of overriding it for potential. You remember your worth outside of someone else's inconsistency, and with every layer of truth you accept, your power returns. The irony is, this is the moment he starts seeing what he couldn't when he had you, because during the relationship, he saw your love as part of the package. He assumed it would always be there, but now, when the fantasy dissolves, so does the version of you who tolerated being underloved. In its place stands someone stronger, more self-aware, harder to access, and impossible to take for granted. That's when regret whispers into his life, not because you left, but because you finally stopped believing the story he benefited from. And as you step into reality, your reality, he's left alone with the story that no longer includes him. Your detachment becomes the plot twist he never saw coming. The most powerful way to make someone realize what they lost isn't through confrontation, manipulation, or pleading. It's through transformation. When you focus on upgrading your own life quietly, he begins to notice things he never paid attention to before. Men are drawn to women who are thriving, not those who are waiting for validation or reconciliation. There's a certain magnetic energy in someone who has reclaimed their own happiness, who is no longer dependent on another person for their self-worth. When he sees you moving forward, not out of spite, but out of self-respect and ambition, it forces him to face the reality that he wasn't the source of your joy, he was the obstacle to it. The contrast between the person you were for him and the person you've become without him is undeniable, and that realization stirs something uncomfortable in him: regret. Upgrading your life quietly doesn't mean creating a spectacle. It isn't about posting pictures to make him jealous or announcing your every achievement. True growth is internal, and it naturally radiates outward. He notices the subtle changes, the confidence in your posture, the light in your eyes, the way your laughter feels freer, the way you carry yourself without seeking his approval. These are things that can't be faked, and they hit harder than any dramatic message ever could. Your evolution becomes a mirror, reflecting the opportunities he squandered, the care he ignored, and the love he failed to nurture. This kind of transformation also shifts the dynamic of power. When you were present and available, he may have taken your patience, your kindness, and your attention for granted. But when those things are redirected toward your own growth and happiness, he feels the absence sharply. Every step you take toward yourself is a reminder of the investment he never made. Every goal you accomplish, every new experience you embrace, and every boundary you uphold demonstrates that your life doesn't revolve around his choices. And that contrast between the life he could have shared with you and the life you are building without him is what generates the deepest form of regret. Men often respond not to words, but to energy. When you start thriving, the energy around you changes. You become untouchable in the sense that your happiness is no longer negotiable. This isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your time, your passion, and your worth. Your success, your joy, and your self-respect are the loudest messages you can send. They communicate that you are not defined by someone else's inability to recognize your value. And that message resonates in ways that drama or arguments never could. What's remarkable is that this quiet growth doesn't just affect him, it transforms you. As you focus on your own life, career, passions, friendships, experiences, you reclaim your identity outside of the relationship. You stop shrinking for someone who never fully saw you. You stop waiting for validation that will never come. You start prioritizing yourself in ways that feel natural, empowering, and necessary. This is the essence of true self-respect, and it's impossible for him to ignore, even if he tries. He begins to see that the person he once overlooked is now thriving without him, and that awareness is heavy. It stings because it's undeniable. Ultimately, when you upgrade your life quietly, the regret he feels isn't manufactured, it's real. He experiences the weight of his choices in the spaces where your absence and your growth intersect. The moments he once took for granted are now filled with your achievements, your joy, and your peace. And the realization that he played no part in this new version of your life, that he missed the chance to grow with you, is something he carries with him. Your transformation, your empowerment, and your unapologetic movement forward are more impactful than any words could ever be. They are a silent, potent reminder that the life you are living now is one he can no longer influence or control, and that knowledge becomes the echo of his regret. You don't need to explain your worth to anyone, especially someone who didn't appreciate it when it was freely given. Many women feel the pressure to justify their value, to make someone see it, to argue their case for love, attention, or respect. But the truth is, worth is demonstrated, not debated. When you stop trying to convince someone to treat you the way you deserve, you reclaim your power in ways words could never achieve. Boundaries, standards, and self-respect are the loudest messages you can send. They show a person exactly what they had, what they lost, and what they will never have again without you ever needing to say a single word. Your actions communicate more clearly than any explanation ever could, and they resonate in the mind of someone who failed to notice your value while they had it. Enforcing boundaries is the cornerstone of this demonstration. When someone consistently disrespects or undervalues you, your response doesn't need to be anger or argument, it needs to be detachment. By withdrawing access to your time, your attention, and your energy, you create a natural consequence for their choices. They begin to see that your presence isn't automatic, your love isn't negotiable, your patience isn't infinite. When he realizes he can no longer take you for granted, The awareness cuts deeper than any confrontation ever could. It forces him to confront the reality of his behavior, and the absence of your availability becomes a reflection of what he squandered. What makes this so effective is that it's subtle yet powerful. You don't have to shout, accuse, or manipulate. You simply embody standards that are non-negotiable. When you consistently refuse to tolerate less than you deserve, when you prioritize your peace over proving a point, you communicate a truth that cannot be ignored. Men are acutely aware when a woman has raised her standards, even if they don't understand exactly why. They sense the shift in energy, the confidence, the clarity, the refusal to compromise on what matters most. This creates a tension that words alone cannot replicate. Your silence, your consistency, and your self-respect become a mirror reflecting his shortcomings. Another key aspect is that this approach protects you as much as it teaches him. When you stop justifying yourself, you stop giving him power over your emotions. You stop waiting for his recognition or approval. You stop shrinking to make his life easier or to manage his perception of you. In doing so, you reclaim the narrative of your own life. You define your worth, not by his response, but by your own standards. And in that reclamation, you inadvertently force him to reckon with the cost of having lost a woman who knew her value and refused to settle for less. The beauty of demonstrating your worth through standards is that it leaves no room for debate or misunderstanding. Actions speak louder than words, and consistent actions speak loudest of all. When he sees that your energy is no longer accessible at his convenience, when he notices that your attention is reserved for those who respect and uplift you, he begins to feel the absence of what he once dismissed. Every choice you make that aligns with your self-respect sends a clear, undeniable message. It echoes in his mind because he cannot undo the reality you are living. A reality where you prioritize yourself, your happiness, and your peace above anyone who failed to value you. In the end, your worth becomes its own statement, and your standards become the vehicle through which he experiences it. You don't need to argue, explain, or justify. Your life, your boundaries, and your unapologetic self-respect do all the talking. And it is in this quiet, firm, unwavering demonstration that regret quietly settles in, leaving him to wrestle with the realization that he had access to something extraordinary and failed to recognize it until it was no longer available. His behavior, his inconsistency, and his inability to show up fully in the relationship never reflected your worth. Yet for so long, it can feel like the burden is on you to make sense of his choices, to fix the unfixable, or to prove that you were enough. One of the most liberating shifts you can make is to stop focusing on him at all, and instead turn your attention toward yourself, toward the life you're building, the woman you're becoming, and the energy you're choosing to cultivate. The moment you redirect your focus, everything changes. You stop asking why he couldn't see your value and start asking what you can create for yourself when someone else's inability to appreciate you is no longer a factor. This isn't about revenge, it's about empowerment, clarity, and reclaiming your own narrative. When you prioritize your growth over his failures, you begin to live in a reality where your worth is undeniable to yourself. You stop shrinking to make him comfortable. You stop tolerating excuses. You stop trying to fill the gaps he left unaddressed. Instead, you invest in yourself in ways that are visible, tangible, and transformative. You pursue your passions, nurture your ambitions, strengthen your mind and body, and surround yourself with people who reflect the respect and care you deserve. Every step you take toward becoming your best self is a subtle yet powerful statement. It communicates to him without words that your life doesn't revolve around his choices or his recognition. It revolves around your own standards, your own happiness, and your own future. This focus on yourself also changes the dynamic of power in ways that are impossible to ignore. While he may have once controlled your attention, your energy, or your emotional availability, that influence fades as you reclaim it. He begins to notice, whether consciously or unconsciously, that the woman he once dismissed is no longer accessible on his terms. You've stopped negotiating your peace for his comfort. You've stopped waiting for him to meet you where you've always been standing. And it's precisely in that absence of expectation and the presence of self-assurance that he begins to feel the weight of his choices. There is no manipulation here, no games, just the undeniable reality that you are no longer an option for someone who failed to recognize your value. In this space, every interaction you have becomes a reflection of who you are becoming rather than who he is failing to be. You carry yourself differently, your energy shifts, you make decisions that honor your standards, and you embrace opportunities that elevate your life. You no longer replay scenarios in your mind where he might have done better or wonder if he ever truly cared. Instead, you embrace the truth. His actions have nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with his limitations. By focusing on yourself, you neutralize the power of his inconsistency and reclaim the narrative that was once in his hands. The impact on him is subtle but profound. He begins to sense a shift he cannot control. He notices that your attention, your patience, and your emotional availability are no longer guaranteed. He realizes that the woman he once underestimated is now thriving, evolving, and expanding beyond the confines of the relationship he failed to nurture. That awareness is uncomfortable for him because it forces him to confront the reality that you were never the problem his choices were. Your growth becomes a mirror that reflects everything he ignored, avoided, or dismissed while he had access to it. And that reflection, combined with your absence, begins to stir regret in ways that words or confrontations never could. Ultimately, when you focus on who you're becoming instead of who he failed to be, you reclaim your freedom. You reclaim your power. You reclaim your life. The regret he experiences is not a product of manipulation. It is a natural consequence of witnessing your transformation. It echoes silently in his mind, a constant reminder that the woman he overlooked has moved beyond the limitations he imposed and is now thriving in a life that he cannot control, influence, or take part in. Peace is one of the most powerful forces a woman can wield, and it is often underestimated. It is not loud, it does not seek revenge, it does not beg for attention. Yet, nothing hits harder than the quiet confidence of someone who has chosen themselves over someone who failed to value them. When you cultivate true peace, inner calm, emotional stability, and unwavering self-respect, you create a presence that cannot be ignored. For the person who once dismissed you, who underestimated your worth, or who treated your care as something permanent and disposable, that peace becomes the punishment they never saw coming. It is the kind of power that cannot be negotiated, argued with, or manipulated. It exists quietly in your choices, in your energy, and in the life you build outside of their influence. The reason peace is so devastating is that it removes the leverage they once had over you. While they may have thrived on your reactions, your attempts to explain, or your emotional availability, peace requires none of that. When you stop engaging in the patterns of drama, the arguments, and the explanations, you deny them the satisfaction of controlling your emotions. You stop giving them a foothold in your life and in your mind. In that space, they are left to confront the reality of their actions without the distraction of your efforts to justify yourself. Your calm becomes a mirror, reflecting back to them everything they ignored, dismissed, or mistreated. And the realization that you are thriving without them is often far more painful than any confrontation could have been. Peace is also powerful because it shifts the focus from them to you. While they may have previously occupied your thoughts constantly, now your attention is fully directed toward your own life, your own growth, and your own happiness. You stop waiting for recognition, apologies, or explanations. You stop shrinking to meet their expectations or accommodate their insecurities. Every decision you make, every boundary you set, and every moment of joy you cultivate is a declaration that your life is no longer contingent on someone else's choices. That independence, that quiet strength, is not only liberating for you, but agonizingly clear for someone who once took your presence for granted. The way peace affects them is subtle, yet it lingers. It shows up in the things they notice, but cannot influence the way you carry yourself, the confidence that radiates from your choices, the joy and fulfillment you create independently. It shows up in moments where they expect reaction and find none, in situations where they hope for access and find barriers, and in opportunities where they anticipate dependence and find self-sufficiency. Every instance of your unwavering calm communicates the truth. You are no longer available for what they failed to appreciate, and your life has moved beyond the limitations of their influence. That silent, consistent demonstration of self-respect and contentment is a constant echo of everything they lost. Cultivating peace also protects you from unnecessary suffering. By prioritizing your own emotional stability, you prevent their behavior from dictating your happiness. You no longer allow past mistakes, unfulfilled promises, or lingering hopes to disturb your present. In choosing peace, you reclaim your narrative and assert control over your energy. You are no longer defined by what they did or didn't do. You are defined by how you respond, how you grow, and how you preserve your own dignity. And it is in that dignity, that self-possession, and that serenity that they encounter true regret. Ultimately, your peace becomes both a shield and a signal. It protects you from emotional turbulence while simultaneously communicating a truth they cannot ignore. You are whole, you are strong, and you are no longer dependent on their validation. And nothing destroys a man's sense of certainty more than realizing that the person he once underestimated is now untouchable, not through anger, manipulation, or revenge, but through the quiet, unshakable power of your own peace. That is the echo of regret that lingers long after your name has faded from his conversations. At the end of the day, forgetting his name isn't about erasing memories or playing games. It's about reclaiming your power, your peace, and your life. When you stop giving him access, stop chasing what wasn't meant for you, and focus on your own growth, your absence becomes a force he cannot ignore. Your name will echo in his regret, not because you sought revenge, but because you chose yourself, and nothing, no words, no actions, no manipulations hits harder than a woman who has fully healed, fully leveled up, and fully moved on.